Hello, welcome to Uncommon Ground, where we explore some of the ideas that are common to us all through life, work, news, or shared experiences. On this episode, I'm going to guess that at some stage in your working life, you've come home wondering how the person you're working for, your boss, got to the position of being your manager. You begin to feel you might be working for an idiot. The clarity we have as we lie awake in the middle of the night is that if this person were more approachable, that our life might be a whole lot nicer. We might be more effective. I'll accept that I might be being a little naive. One man I thought might give my sense of justice a good workout is my guest on this episode. Martin Horan has been involved in the world of training and development for over 25 years. He's worked as a director of training, as head of management training for a training institute, and more recently as an independent training and development consultant. His professional career includes time working directly for Aer Lingus and Gulf Air, the Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance, and Saudi American Bank. At last count, he's carried out consulting assignments in over 35 countries. He joined me from his home in Westmeath here in Ireland, and I started our chat by asking Martin to speculate why bad managers get rewarded and sometimes even get promoted.
It's been a fascination for me down through the years. Michael, I've been doing leadership and management training for quite a while in quite a number of organizations, geographies, cultures, and you do come across these horror stories. You know, when you're talking with people about motivation and emotional intelligence and good communication, and they say, but what about my manager? Or what about my vice president? Or what about, and they go on then to tell you a story that would absolutely frighten you in terms of what he or she does, how they behave, and you say, oh my goodness, how did they get to that level? And indeed, I've worked in some organizations, I'm sure you have as well, where you see people at very senior levels behave in a way that just bears no resemblance to what would be acceptable in terms of how to treat people. And I've come to the conclusion, or what I always say on the training course to people is, that's a great opportunity for you. And they look at me and they say, "What?" And I say, "Well, isn't it wonderful if that person makes you feel like that? Obviously, there's an opportunity for you there to learn from and watch and observe and make sure that you don't do any of that stuff. Use yourself as a barometer. Whether you are an existing leader or a potential leader, ask yourself, how would I feel if somebody did or said that to me? That will be a very good measure of whether or not this is effective." Back to your question is why are they rewarded? There's a number of reasons. One of which is they tend to be very good at their job. They tend to bring in good results and good numbers. They also tend, I have a view on this now, and I don't have research that backs it up, but it's empirical, if you like, it's observation. They tend to be quite political and ambitious and good game players, if you like. So they tend to overrate themselves, and they tend to be willing to push themselves ahead of other people. And organizations, because they bring in good numbers, or because they've got very good technical skills, because they've proven themselves adept at specific technical or functional aspects of the job, say, we'll promote him.
All right, but then, what we have then is, I suppose you might be giving me a little bit of direction to be not so naive that everybody who works in the corporate world has to be nice in order to get ahead.
No, they don't have to be nice, and they don't even have to be loved or even liked. I often say this to people. The problem becomes when they are either feared or hated.
Well, we're moving into the category now of the bully. And organizations, let's be fair, have tolerated that kind of behavior because ultimately, as you say, the person maybe gets the job done. When you get towards, I suppose, the end of a working life and you look back at a particular time that you've spent with it and just think of the wasted time when you could have been doing some amazing things if you weren't watching your back all the time.
And worse than that as well, it's not just you watching your back, the terrible burning of people that these people can do. And I've seen it time and again within departments and within organizations. People just up and leave. For pastures new, for pastures fair. And they say, oh, to hell with this, I can't stick this anymore. And you see it, and some organizations that I've been at very quickly or very effectively begin to recognize, that Horan fellow, he's, the turnover in that department is ridiculous. What on earth's going on there? Numbers are great. People are siphoning through, we're losing them.
The science is that if a person in a leadership role is doing two things, subjugating or eliminating, then you have a problem on your hands. In other words, what this person is going to most likely do is they're going to subjugate people so that they can supposedly lead or manage them. And if they don't match or they don't fit, they eliminate them, they get rid of them. But somebody in the organization is supposed to have an eye on that to see why it's happening. What happens there?
Yeah, it is an organization failure, absolutely. And you'd have to say senior management, or you'd have to say the HR department, or the people who watch and manage succession, who watch and manage complaint levels, who watch and manage and listen to representations from staff bodies and unions and staff associations and so on. What on earth are they doing?
Where does the silence come from?
Fear, self-interest. It takes a lot of courage, doesn't it? To kind of stand up and say, no, that's not on. You can't say that to somebody. You can't behave like that.
There's collateral damage, of course, is just happening to a lot of people as well, because the same individual who, I can recall a colleague of mine who used to, on Monday morning, throw up before he would go into work.
Oh, God.
The environment was so toxic. And of course, people would say to you, oh, for God's sake, get out of there, change, move. But, that isn't necessarily always an option. And the collateral damage, of course, is the effect that it has on their partner and possibly on their family and everything else that goes along. And there might even be a conversation. Your man needs to harden up. He needs to pull himself up. There's the little element of victim blaming that goes on in it.
Yeah, there is a bit. And I run sessions for people on occasion on assertiveness and so on. And one of the things you have to say if they're dealing with these sorts of bullies, managers from hell and so on, is to talk about the economic reality that people face. Can you afford to leave? And the answer is no, I can't. Okay, well, can you think about planning for a situation where you will be able to afford to leave? In other words, where you have alternatives. And in the meantime, taking some steps to protect yourself, to mind yourself while this is going on until you can leave. So you're absolutely right. And it's very unfair to say, oh, man up. Sometimes that's just not on, because the person has the level of authority or power, and the person on the receiving end just is in a very weak position by comparison. There's an element of chicken and egg to it all, though, isn't there, Michael? That, bullies for sure will tend to continue as long as they're let. But the person on the receiving end may not feel that they can actually stand up to them. And that's just really sad.
We're in a situation of polarization, where everything is now polarized. And what seems to be that you and I are falling into the same trap now is that we're polarizing leaders into the good guys and the bad guys, the good women and the bad women, the white hats and the black hats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a range in between the two. Absolutely, I believe that. And down through the years when I've been in leadership positions myself, either formal or informal, I would be so aware of my own shortcomings, not at being anywhere near the Mandela and Gandhi end of the scale, but hopefully trying to avoid the other end. And it's about that, I think, for all of the people, Michael, that we talk to, is look, try to learn from and observe and copy what it is that you see. The good team leader in your organization, or the nice person who was interested in you when you were young in your career. What was it that they did that worked so well for you? It's not rocket science. You don't have to read millions of books.
A junior doctor recently said to me in a conversation, the worst reputation you can get in the hospital is being the nice doctor. You will be bleeped to within an inch of your life. Everything will be dumped on your back, and you'll become, a willing horse, because you're not. In fact, this person said to me that the best advice they were given when they went into the hospital was to have a controlled loss of temper on their first night and frighten the living daylights out of everybody around them. And you can kind of see to a certain extent how there's a little bit of merit. People wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be being this tough individual if it didn't have a value to it.
Yeah, but I'm prompted to think of even going back to our school days, Michael. And do you remember the teacher that you were afraid of in school? Who was very strict.
The Christian brother, yeah.
Well, yeah. Now,
do you remember what we used to do to substitute teachers as well?
Well, I do, but I'm thinking of one particular, the best teacher that I ever had in school, and he was a really tough guy. But by the time I got to 6th year and had a little bit of sense, I didn't like him or love him, but I really respected him.
Yeah.
And I absolutely did. And, that's part of what managers and leaders have to do. They obviously have, so many demands on their time and for their attention, whether it's a doctor or a captain on an aircraft or the senior cabin crew or a person on a production line. Absolutely. They can't be Mr. or Miss Nice to everybody.
Soft touch.
Yeah, for sure. But the doctor there is describing the extreme. And I'm sure there are plenty of them who are well capable of being nice when that's appropriate and saying, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that.
Well, this comes back to what you mentioned earlier on, is the idea of assertiveness, that it doesn't seem to be a readily available skill for a lot of people. You know, we've all found ourselves with other people's footprints on our back.
Speak for yourself.
No, I am speaking for myself, and hugely amazed that you're not. But anyway,
I suppose I have. I tell a story on one of those little videos that I do about the very early days of my career, and I compare two managers that I had back then, supervisors as they would have been called, and one was just so difficult to deal with and really got up people's noses, mine in particular, and the other was just Mr. Reasonable and so on. And I make the point actually that bad manager was actually quite good, and I liked him quite a bit early days when I started, because he was very patient initially, would tend to, metaphorically put an arm around your shoulder and say, here's how you do this, here's the operations procedures and so on. Quite a micromanager in many ways, which was good for your first week, month, whatever. But the problem was after 3 months or 2 years, he would still tend to do that. Oh, come in here and we'll have a look at the operations manual, how you handle this. And I'm sorry saying, I don't need the training.
I'm grand, thanks. Yeah,
I just need a decision.
Let me on with my job. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, he wasn't a step on your back, but I have experienced him, in fairness. And I suppose it's a little bit like letting the water run off your back. You kind of have to get over it to a certain extent and say, well, he's a pig, but I don't have to be. She's an idiot and I don't have to copy that, or I don't get me down. Now that's easier said than done, I know, particularly for people who are facing it every day and facing it to the nth degree. And it's about this issue of perception, how we see things. And I think one of the things about good and bad leaders is it's all about me. It's all self-centered. It's all, what am I going to get out of this? Screw you. Well, or, pat you on the back if I think it's going to help me out. Very manipulative.
My guest on the podcast on the Common Ground this week is Martin Horan, Learning and Development Consultant. Martin, you led me there to another idea, which is the idea that sometimes these leaders are actually only role playing. They're acting the role, but ultimately good leaders, and we started our conversation by talking about the bad ones. The good leaders seem to have a set of competencies that pay off well for them.
I think there's a lot of layers to it. Coming back to your point, two issues, the emotional intelligence one and your point about playing the part. It's one of the things that you have to do sometimes is just bite your tongue. And as a leader, that's very important as well. Somebody bursts into tears in front of you at a performance appraisal discussion because you said something mildly critical. You might be sitting there saying, for flip's sake, grow up, in your head. You're not going to say that. Or somebody is really angry and annoyed at something that you said. You might be inclined to say, for God's sake, calm down. But you don't say that.
Why?
Because you know that's going to exacerbate the situation.
But it might be honest. It might, at that particular moment, it might be honest.
I love it. This issue about honesty is great. Honesty is overrated. You can be too honest.
Is that a red flag I see flying behind you there?
You can be too honest. And people with emotional intelligence know that. They know there are times, I always say to people, look, don't lie. I would go so far as to say never lie. Certainly as a leader, and certainly in an interview, don't lie. But you don't have to tell the truth, and all the truth, the whole truth, all the time. So, or the other side of the coin, let's bring it down to leadership, 101. A manager or a leader has to communicate and implement a decision with his team that he or she is not entirely in agreement with. Don't tell them that. Don't say this is rubbish. Don't say more bullshit from the 9th floor. Tell them, honestly, I can see where there are some difficulties with this. Or sure, there is a problem in this area, but here's the reasons for, here's the justifications, here's whatever. So this issue of honesty, that's why you don't tell the person, grow up, stop crying. That's why you don't tell the person, calm down. Because it's not the right time to say that sort of thing, even though that's what you feel. And even though it's an honest emotion, absolutely.
But authenticity and being real and all of that is the new canon. It's what we're supposed to be following.
Yeah, but hang on a second now. You're getting into the whole jargon thing, Michael, that us HR people and development people love. And you said it yourself, emotional intelligence. Along with authenticity, we talk about humility. So there's loads of contradictions and dichotomies in this world. So you have to be humble enough on occasion to know when to shut up, when not to call a spade a spade. Okay, it might be authentic, it might be being true to yourself, but it's not serving the purpose of this relationship on this occasion. It's not going to progress this matter for us. It's not going to help us to achieve our objectives. It's not going to sort out the issue. So there's loads of shades of grey.
Finally, Martin, if you find yourself working for an idiot What do you do?
Yeah, no, I was going to say I've had a few, but in reality, it was very early days in my career. And what you tried to do, I remember, I'll give you can I go back to that bad manager example?
Do.
Because he was one of a number of supervisors. I was working in a shift pattern. And when it came to performance appraisal time, the department head called me into the office and he said, Martin, I've got 4 forms from 4 of your supervisors. And he says, we are now today going to complete the final form. And he says, I'm using these as the templates or as the feed into it. And we're going to discuss them. And he gave them to me. He let me read them. And 3 of them were great. Well, sorry, 3 of them were okay. And 1 was not good. And he says, what do you think of those, Martin? I said, well, I like these 3. But I don't agree with this one. And he says, and I said, I know who this is. They weren't signed, by the way, interestingly enough. I know who this is. And he says, well, what do you think about that? He says, by the way, I agree with the 3. I don't agree with the 1.
Okay.
So I thought that was very honest. So we're going to take it. But what does this say to you, Martin? And I said, well, it tells me I have a fair bit of work to do in my relationship with X.
Number 1 here,
Yeah. And when you work for an idiot, you've got to think about that issue. People talk about when you work for these sort of people, maybe they don't trust you. You have to, really be careful to dot the I's and cross the T's. You have to find out what sort of communication they want and how regular that needs to be. You have to find out what their hot buttons are and try to avoid those. One of the issues, a simple thing, is who has the biggest element of the responsibility for the relationship. Now, you might argue that the leader surely has more, a greater percentage, but no, it's not. It's the follower. And so, because it's more important to me, I need to invest more time and effort and energy in trying to facilitate, to a certain extent, this idiot, as you call them, because and
it's a handy phrase, yeah.
The technical term,
yeah.
And survive it as long as best I can. And sure enough, having had that brought to my attention, I did make an effort to be a bit less impatient and judgmental, etc., in relation to the guy concerned.
I thought this is where it was going to go, is that we were going to end up ultimately sometimes shouldering a little bit of the responsibility ourselves. Is that if we are in the presence of somebody who the organization considers to be valuable and has a leadership or management title, but they're not great in terms of the communication, that we have to kind of get up and meet them halfway.
Yeah, I'm suggesting more than halfway.
I know.
For our survival, and in the meantime, if it's really bad, carefully plan an exit and look for alternatives in other parts of the organization or in other organizations.
Well, this is one of the things, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was running a session in a foreign country, and I was staying in the hotel where the session was being run, and there was one particular guy who said to me, Martin, I'd like to talk to you about something personally, off topic, and we had a cup of coffee in their lounge that evening, and he was almost in tears. About this issue. I have this boss, and he went through, and it was the boss from hell, Michael. I won't, no need to tell. And I kind of came to the conclusion that you and I are, and talked through all that, and kind of as a final comment, I said, sure, maybe he'll die. and that was exactly the reaction. He laughed and we laughed and said, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but anyway. About 2 or 3 years later, I was back in this same city for the same organization, and who did I, on a next stage of the course, here was my friend again. And when I saw him, he looked at me and he smiled, and he said, I have to talk to you at break time. And he came up with a big smile. And I said, don't tell me you died. He says, no, better than that. He says he left the organization. And in some cases, that's what you have to hope for, that I'm planning my exit strategy, but maybe they'll get rid of him, or he or she will go somewhere else as well. That's probably not what people who have an idiot for a manager want to hear, but sometimes that's the reality, isn't it?
Martin Horan, thanks for joining us on Common Ground tonight.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Please feel free to share this and subscribe to get an update on new episodes.